The afternoon sun hung heavy over Las Vegas on June 14, 1963. The temperature had climbed past 100 degrees, and the Strip was shimmering with heat and possibility. Inside the Sands Hotel, the air conditioning hummed, slot machines chimed, and dealers shuffled cards with practiced precision. Everything was exactly as it should be in the entertainment capital of the world. Dean Martin needed to get away from it. He'd finished recording sessions that morning, run through rehearsals for that night's show, and smile through 3 separate meetings about upcoming television appearances. By 2 p.m., he was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of being Dean Martin, the persona, the product, the perfectly packaged entertainer who always had a drink in his hand and a joke on his lips. So he did what he rarely did. He slipped out a side entrance, told no one where he was going, and started walking away from the Strip, away from the bright lights and the tourists and the people who wanted something from him. Just Dean, wearing sunglasses and a casual shirt, walking the back streets of Las Vegas where the city showed its real face. The neighborhood behind the famous hotels told a different story than the one advertised on postcards. These were the streets where dealers and showgirls lived in modest apartments, where construction workers from the newest casino projects grabbed lunch at small diners, where the machinery of Vegas ran without the glamour that paid for it all. Dean walked slowly, hands in his pockets, enjoying the anonymity. A few people glanced at him, maybe recognizing something familiar, but no one approached. In 1963, even celebrities could sometimes just exist in public without being swarmed. That's when he heard it, a voice rough and weathered, singing a song Dean knew better than almost anyone alive, a song that had become part of his identity, part of his legacy, part of the American consciousness. When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Amore, but it wasn't coming from a radio or jukebox. It was live, acoustic, unpolished. Dean stopped walking and listened, trying to locate the source. The voice had the quality of someone who'd once had training, once had talent, but time and hardship had scraped away the polish, leaving only the raw foundation. Dean followed the sound. On the sidewalk in front of a closed pawn shop sat a man who looked older than his years. His face was deeply lined, tanned dark from years in the sun. His clothes were worn thin, patched in places, clean but faded beyond repair. A battered acoustic guitar, scarred and held together with what looked like wire in one spot, rested across his knee. An empty coffee can sat on the pavement beside him with a few coins inside. The man was singing That's Amore, not with joy or lightness, but with something else. Longing, maybe, or memory. He sang it like someone remembering a time when the words meant something, when life had the romance the song promised. Dean stood 15 feet away listening. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here was his signature song, the tune that helped make him famous, that had bought him homes and cars and security, being sung by a man who clearly had none of those things. The contrast felt like something out of a movie, except this was real, and the man singing had no idea Dean Martin was listening. The veteran finished the song, let the final chord hang in the air, then started strumming something else, something older, a war-era tune that Dean recognized from his own time entertaining troops. Dean walked closer. The man looked up, squinting against the sun, his eyes cautious. You developed that caution when you lived on the streets, when every interaction could go wrong, when you learned to read people's intentions in the first 3 seconds. That was nice, Dean said simply, the way you sang that. The veteran's expression didn't change. He probably heard every kind of comment over the years, genuine and mocking. Thanks, he said, his voice hoarse. You want to request something? I know about 40 songs. Where'd you learn to play? Dean asked, ignoring the implied transaction. The man studied him more carefully now. Army, World War II. We had a lot of time between things, you know? Someone taught me guitar. I taught other guys card tricks. Kept us sane. Dean nodded. You serve in Europe or Pacific? Europe, 101st Airborne. The veteran said it without pride or shame, just stating a fact. Normandy, Bastogne, the whole tour. Dean felt something shift in his chest. The 101st Airborne were heroes, legends. They jumped into Normandy on D-Day, held Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge when they were surrounded and outgunned. And now one of them was sitting on a Las Vegas sidewalk playing guitar for spare change. That's quite a service record, Dean said quietly. The veteran shrugged. Long time ago. Different life. What happened when you came home? The question hung there. It was personal, maybe too personal for a stranger to ask. But the veteran looked at Dean's face, really looked, and maybe saw something genuine there. Or maybe he was just tired of carrying the story alone. What happened? The veteran laughed, but there was no humor in it. Same thing that happened to a lot of us. I came back, and I didn't fit anywhere anymore. Tried going back to my job at a printing press, but I'd shake too much from the dreams. Couldn't focus. Boss was patient for a while, but eventually I was costing more than I was worth. Got married before I shipped out, but when I came back, I wasn't the same guy she married. Started drinking too much, sleeping too little. She tried, I'll give her that. But after 3 years of me waking up screaming, thinking I was back in a foxhole, she'd had enough. The veteran strummed a few chords absently. Lost a job, lost a wife, lost the apartment. Bounced around for a while, worked odd jobs. Construction, loading docks, anything that paid. But the dreams never stopped, and the drinking got worse. Eventually, I ended up here. He gestured vaguely at the street around them. How long? Dean asked. On the streets? 5 years, give or take. Time gets fuzzy when every day is about the same. Find food, find somewhere to sleep, try to make enough for the next meal. Music helps. Gives me something to do that's not just surviving. Dean sat down on the curb next to him, surprising the veteran. People didn't usually sit with homeless men. They dropped coins and moved on, uncomfortable with proximity to failure. Why, that's Amore. Dean asked. The veteran smiled for the first time, and for a moment you could see the young man he'd been before the war. My wife, the one I told you about, she loved that song. We heard it on the radio right after we got married, and she made me dance with her in the kitchen. She couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she'd sing it anyway. He paused, lost a memory. I sing it, sometimes to remember when things were good. When I was good, Dean felt his throat tighten. This man was singing Dean's song to remember being human, to hold on to a piece of life before everything fell apart. You know who sang that song, right? Dean asked carefully. The veteran looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Dean took off his sunglasses. Recognition flickered across the veteran's face, then disbelief, then something like embarrassment. Oh, Christ, the veteran said, starting to scramble to his feet. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you, Mr. Martin. I probably butchered your song. I didn't mean any disrespect. Hey, Dean said, putting a hand on the man's shoulder, keeping him seated. You didn't butcher anything. You sang it the way it's supposed to be sung, with feeling, with memory. That's all any song is. Really, it's just a way to hold on to feeling. The veteran stared at him, uncertain. I must look like a fool. Sitting here singing your songs to you. You look like a veteran who served his country and deserves better than what he got. Dean said firmly, What's your name? Robert Connolly. My friends call me Bobby. Well, Bobby, I'm Dean, and I want to ask you something. When's the last time you slept in a real bed? Bobby looked confused by the question. I don't know. A while. When's the last time you had a hot meal? Not something from a can or a handout, but a real meal. Mr. Martin, I appreciate whatever you're thinking, but I'm not a charity case. I'm not talking about charity, Dean interrupted. I'm talking about respect. You jumped out of a plane into occupied France. You held a position when you were surrounded by the German army. You did things most people can't even imagine, and you did them for people like me, for everyone. So I'm asking you, when's the last time anyone treated you like the hero you are? Bobby's eyes were wet now. I'm not a hero. Heroes made it home okay. Heroes made it home, Dean corrected. Some of them just carried the war with them. That doesn't make you less of a hero. It makes you human. Dean stood up and extended his hand. Come with me, Bobby, just for today. Let me buy you dinner, get you cleaned up, and we'll figure out the rest. Bobby hesitated. You could see the war in his head. The calculations. Was this safe? Was this real? What was the catch? I promise you, Dean said softly, there's no catch. No cameras, no publicity. Just one veteran doing something small for another veteran. You served? Bobby asked, surprised. For F, Dean admitted. Bad back. They wouldn't take me, and I felt guilty about it ever since. So let me do this. Let me do something that matters. Bobby looked down at his guitar, at the coffee can with its handful of coins, at the street that had been his home for 5 years. Then he looked back at Dean Martin, one of the most famous men in America, sitting on a curb in the Las Vegas heat, treating him like a person. Okay, Bobby whispered. Okay. Dean helped him to his feet, picked up the guitar case himself, and they started walking, not back toward the Strip, but toward one of the smaller, older hotels that Dean knew about. Places that were clean and decent, but didn't ask too many questions. As they walked, Dean asked Bobby about the war. Not the trauma, not the nightmares, but the other parts. The friends he'd made, the places he'd seen, the moments of humanity in the middle of horror. Bobby talked haltingly at first, then with more confidence. These were stories he hadn't told in years. Stories that reminded him he'd once been part of something bigger than survival. They reached the Desert Inn, a respectable hotel away from the main Strip. Dean walked Bobby through the lobby, ignoring the looks from staff and guests. He went straight to the front desk. I need a room for my friend here, Dean said to clerk. Something quiet, comfortable. Put it on my account, and I'll be covering it for the next month. The clerk's eyebrows rose, but he nodded. Of course, Mr. Martin. And send up a meal from the restaurant. Steak, medium rare, all the sides. Pie for dessert. Whatever pie you've got. Right away, sir. Dean turned to Bobby, who looked stunned. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go up to that room, take a long shower, eat that meal, and sleep in that bed for as long as you want. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about what comes next. But today, you rest. No decisions, no stress, just rest. Mr. Martin, I can't accept this. Dean, he corrected. And you're not accepting anything. You're taking what you earned. You think you're the first veteran I've met who got a raw deal coming home? You think you're the first guy who needed a hand? Let me tell you something, Bobby. The measure of a country isn't how we treat our heroes when we need them. It's how we treat them when the war is over. And if we're failing at that, then guys like me need to step up. Bobby's voice broke. Why are you doing this? Dean thought about that question. He thought about all the shows he'd done for military audiences, all the letters from soldiers who told him his music helped him through hard times. He thought about the guilt he'd always carried for not serving, for being safe while men like Bobby jumped into hell. Because you were singing my song like it meant something, Dean said simply. And it reminded me that songs aren't just entertainment. They're memories. They're pieces of our lives. You sang That's Amore, and I heard what it meant to you, what it cost you. And I realized that song doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's ever needed to remember when life was good. So really, Bobby, you were sharing something with me. I'm just returning the favor. The clerk handed Bobby a key. Dean walked him to the elevator, carrying the guitar case. On the way up, neither man spoke. The elevator was full of well-dressed tourists heading to dinner shows, and Bobby looked out of place in his worn clothes. But Dean stood next to him like they were old friends, like there was nothing unusual about the scene at all. At the room, Dean opened the door and ushered Bobby inside. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and comfortable. A real bed with clean sheets, a private bathroom, a window with a view of the city. Bobby set his few possessions down carefully, like he was afraid of damaging something. Dean put the guitar case on the bed. That guitar, Dean said, it's held together with wire. It works, Bobby said defensively. I'm sure it does. But tomorrow, we're getting you a new one. A good one. You're too talented to be playing on something that's falling apart. Mr. Martin, Dean, you've already done too much. Dean smiled. Bobby, I haven't even started. Get some rest. I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we'll figure out the next steps. There are programs for veterans, support services. I know people who can help connect you with job training, housing assistance, medical care for those nightmares you mentioned. But that's tomorrow. Today, you eat, you rest, and you remember that you matter. He headed for the door, then turned back. One more thing. That voice of yours, even rough like it is, it's good. You had training. Some. In high school, before the war. I was in the choir. You still remember how to read music? I think so. It's been a while. Dean nodded slowly. Okay, here's something to think about while you rest. What if you could sing again? Not on street corners, but somewhere people would actually listen? I know some guys who run lounges around town, smaller places that need entertainers. Nothing fancy, but steady work for someone with talent. Would that interest you? Bobby stared at him. You're talking about getting me a job? A real job. I'm talking about getting you back to what you're good at. Music. You've got the voice, you got the skill. You just need someone to give you a chance. And I happen to know a few someones. Why would they hire me? Because I'm going to ask them to, Dean said simply. And because once they hear you sing, they'll realize I was right. Think about it. We'll talk tomorrow. Dean left before Bobby could protest further. He took the elevator back down, walked past the curious stairs, and headed out into the Las Vegas heat. But instead of going back to the Sands, he made a phone call from a payphone on the corner. Hey, it's Dean. Yeah, I'm fine. Listen, I need a favor. There's a guy, a veteran 101st Airborne. He's been living rough, but he's got talent. Real talent. I'm going to need some help getting him back on his feet. Over the next hour, Dean made 4 more calls. To the Veterans Administration office in Las Vegas, to a friend who ran a small lounge near downtown, to a social worker he'd worked with on other charity cases, and finally to his own account with instructions to set up a fund that would cover Bobby's expenses for the next 6 months. Don't tell him about the fund, Dean instructed. Let him think it's just the 1 month at the hotel. I don't want him feeling like he owes me anything, or like this is charity. Make it seem like the job and the support services are doing the heavy lifting. I'm just the guy who made introductions. His accountant used the Dean's quiet generosity, simply agreed. The next morning, Dean returned to the Desert Inn at 9 a.m. He found Bobby in the lobby, freshly showered and shaved, wearing the same clothes but looking more human than he had the day before. There was color in his face, and his eyes had lost some of their desperate edge. How'd you sleep? Dean asked. Like I was dead, Bobby admitted. I forgot what it felt like to not wake up every 2 hours. Good. You eat. The steak last night, and they sent a breakfast this morning. I've never eaten so much in my life. Dean smiled. Get used to it. Come on, we got errands to run. The first stop was a music store on the east side of town. Dean walked Bobby through rows of guitars until they found one that felt right. Not the most expensive, but solid, well-made, with a warm tone that filled the small shop. Bobby played a few chords, his fingers remembering old patterns, and his eyes lit up. This is too much, Bobby said, but there was longing in his voice. Consider it a business investment, Dean replied. You're going to need it for work. Next, Dean took him to a thrift store and bought him 3 complete outfits. Nothing fancy, but clean, well-fitting clothes that would let Bobby walk into a job interview without shame. Then came the hard part. Dean drove Bobby to the Veterans Administration office, where a social worker named Martha Jennings was waiting. Dean had explained the situation over the phone, and Martha, a veteran herself, understood immediately. Bobby, Dean said gently, Martha here specializes in helping veterans readjust. She can connect you with counseling for the nightmares, help you find permanent housing, even assistance with job training if you need it. I need you to talk to her, okay? Really talk to her. Tell her what you need. Bobby looked scared. Asking for help meant admitting vulnerability, and men of his generation weren't taught to do that. I'll wait right here, Dean added. Take your time. For the next 2 hours, Bobby talked with Martha. Dean sat in the waiting room, reading old magazines, turning down coffee, and deflecting recognition from other veterans who'd come in for appointments. When Bobby finally emerged, he looked exhausted but lighter somehow. She's going to help me, Bobby said quietly. She says there's a program, counseling for combat trauma. It's new, experimental, but she thinks it could help with the nightmares. And there's subsidized housing for veterans, places I might qualify for. That's good, Dean said. That's really good, Bobby. She wants to know if I'd be willing to talk to other veterans, guys who are struggling. She thinks my story might help them see there's a way forward. Dean felt pride surge through him. This was it. This was Bobby starting to see himself as someone who mattered again, someone who had something to offer. Would you want to do that? Maybe, Bobby said, if I can get myself together first. If I can prove there really is a way forward. You will, Dean said with certainty. The last stop of the day was the Silver Slipper Lounge, a small venue off the main strip that catered to locals and late-night crowds. The owner, Jack Morrison, was an old friend of Dean's from before either of them was famous. Jack had served in the Navy during the war and understood what veterans face coming home. Dean introduced Bobby, explained the situation in broad strokes, and then asked Bobby to play something. Bobby sat on the small stage, holding his new guitar like it was made of glass. He looked terrified, but when he started playing, when he started singing, the fear disappeared. He sang That's Amore again, but this time with more hope in it, more life. Then he sang some old standards, some blues, showing the range of his ability. When he finished, Jack was nodding. You're rough, but you got something. How do you feel about 3 nights a week? Wednesday through Friday, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Play a mix of requests and your own choices. Pay's not great, but it's steady, and tips can be decent if you connect with the crowd. Bobby looked at Dean, then back at Jack. You're serious? You'd hire me? I'm hiring the talent, Jack said. The rest, you'll work on. You've got 2 weeks to rehearse. Get your set list together. Dean here says you're good for it, and I trust his judgment. After they left the Silver Slipper, Bobby stood on the sidewalk looking dazed. In the span of 24 hours, he'd gone from singing on street corners to having a hotel room, new clothes, a new guitar, support services, and a job offer. I don't know what to say, Bobby whispered. Don't say anything, Dean replied. Just promise me you'll follow through. Show up to those counseling sessions. Practice for the gig. Give yourself a real chance. I promise, Bobby said, and meant it. Dean dropped Bobby back at the hotel with instructions to rest, practice, and meet with Martha Jennings again later that week. As he drove away, Dean felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not the satisfaction of a good performance or the pleasure of fame, but the simple, deep satisfaction of having done something that mattered. Over the next 2 weeks, Dean checked in on Bobby regularly. Not every day, because he didn't want Bobby to feel watched or controlled, but enough to make sure things were moving forward. Bobby attended his first counseling session and reported that it was harder than jumping out a plane, but he'd gone back for the second session anyway. He'd practiced guitar until his fingers bled, then practiced more. He'd started looking at apartments in the subsidized housing complex Martha had recommended. When opening night at the Silver Slipper arrived, Dean showed up unannounced and sat in the back corner. The lounge was about half full, locals mostly, people looking for live music and cheap drinks. Bobby took the stage looking nervous but determined. He wore one of the outfits Dean had bought him, held his new guitar with confidence, and started his set. He wasn't perfect. His voice cracked once, and he forgot the words to a song halfway through, laughing it off and starting over. But he connected with the audience. He told stories between songs, talked about being a veteran, about second chances, about remembering to appreciate the good things. By the end of his first set, people were listening intently. By the end of the night, he'd made $47 in tips. Dean slipped out before Bobby saw him, leaving an extra $100 with a bartender to add to Bobby's tip jar anonymously. 3 months later, Bobby Connolly had moved into a small apartment near downtown. He'd been attending counseling twice a week and reported that the nightmares were less frequent, less intense. He'd been playing at the Silver Slipper 3 nights a week and had built up a small but loyal following. Jack Morrison had even increased his pay after seeing how much the crowds liked him. Bobby still had hard days. Recovery wasn't linear, and there were nights when the war came back so vividly he couldn't perform. But now he had support systems in place. He had Martha Jennings to call, other veterans in his counseling group who understood, and the music itself as an anchor. Dean continued to check in, though less frequently as Bobby stabilized. They'd meet for coffee occasionally, two men who formed an unlikely friendship over a song on a sidewalk. Bobby never fully understood why Dean had done what he did, why a famous entertainer had cared about one homeless veteran. Dean never really explained it beyond the simple truth that it was the right thing to do. But privately, Dean understood what that day had meant for him too. He'd been feeling disconnected from the real impact of his work, treating performance as just another job. Finding Bobby singing That's Amore on that street corner reminded Dean why music mattered. It wasn't about fame or money or crowds. It was about connecting human beings to moments of beauty, of memory, of hope. Years later, in 1967, Dean was doing an interview for a magazine profile. The journalist asked him about his charitable work, about the various causes he quietly supported. Dean typically deflected these questions, uncomfortable with praise for doing what seemed obvious and necessary. But this time, he told the story of Bobby Connolly, not for publicity, but because the journalist was a veteran himself, and Dean thought the story might matter to him. "I found this guy singing my song on a street corner," Dean said, "and it hit me that I'd been treating That's Amore like it was mine, like I owned it. But really, songs belong to everyone who needs them." This veteran, he was using that song to hold on to a memory of when his life was good, and I realized that's the real power of music. It's not entertainment. It's survival. It's memory. It's hope. The journalist asked what became of Bobby Connolly. "Last I heard, he's still playing at the Silver Slipper. Got himself an apartment. Been going to counseling, doing better. Still struggles sometimes. But he's not on the street anymore. He's not just surviving. He's living." "And you did that for him?" Dean shook his head. "I didn't do anything except stop and listen. Bobby did the hard part. He chose to accept help. He showed up to counseling sessions, even when it hurt. He practiced until his fingers bled. He stood on that stage when he was terrified. All I did was open a door. He walked through it." But that wasn't entirely true, and Dean knew it. He'd done more than open a door. He'd seen a human being where others saw an inconvenience. He'd recognized talent where others saw failure. He'd offered dignity where the world offered judgment. The story of Dean Martin and Bobby Connolly never became famous. It didn't make headlines or become part of the Rat Pack legend. But it mattered more than most of the things Dean Martin did that did make headlines. Because in that moment, on that sidewalk, hearing his own song sung by a man the world had forgotten, Dean Martin remembered something essential. Success isn't measured by how high you climb. It's measured by who you help up along the way. Bobby Connolly continued playing at the Silver Slipper for another 15 years. He never became famous, never recorded an album, never played anywhere bigger than that small lounge. But he built a life. He reconnected with his ex-wife, and while they didn't reconcile romantically, they rebuilt a friendship. He became a mentor in the Veterans Counseling Program, helping other former soldiers navigate their return to civilian life. He played music not for survival, but for joy. And whenever he played That's Amore, which he did almost every night, he'd tell the story of the day Dean Martin sat down on a curb next to him and treated him like a person who mattered. Not like a project, not like a charity case, like a fellow veteran, a fellow musician, a fellow human being who'd hit a rough patch and deserved a second chance. That's what Dean Martin left behind that day. Not just money or connections or opportunities, though those mattered. He left behind a reminder that everyone has value, everyone has talent, everyone deserves dignity. He left behind proof that the most powerful thing a successful person can do isn't to build monuments to their own greatness, but to see greatness in others when the rest of the world has stopped looking. On Dean Martin's last television special in 1984, near the end of his performing career, he sang That's Amore one more time. The audience cheered, expecting the usual smooth, playful performance. But Dean sang it differently that night. He sang it slower, more thoughtfully, like he was remembering something important. After the song, he stepped to the edge of the stage and spoke directly to the camera. "You know, I've sung that song 1,000 times. More than 1,000 times. And for a long time, I thought it was just a fun song about being in love, about romance and pizza and the moon. But I learned something a while back. Songs are whatever people need them to be. For some people, That's Amore is about falling in love. For others, it's about remembering when they were young. And for one guy I met, it was about holding on to hope when he had nothing else left. Dean paused, his characteristic smile softening into something more genuine. That's the real magic of music. It's not about the singer. It's about what the listener hears, what they feel, what they remember. So if you've got a song that means something to you, hold on to it. And if you see someone who needs a song to hold on to, help them find it. That's Amore too. That's what love really is. The camera pulled back as Dean walked off stage, and the credits rolled. Most viewers probably didn't think much about those comments. But Bobby Connolly, watching from his small apartment in Las Vegas, understood exactly what Dean meant, because 21 years earlier, Dean Martin had helped him find his song again, and in doing so, had helped him find himself. That's the real story. Not about a famous entertainer doing charity, but about one human being recognizing another human being's worth when the world had decided they had none. It's about the choice to stop and listen, to sit down on a curb with someone everyone else walks past, to treat dignity as non-negotiable regardless of circumstances. Dean Martin left behind dozens of recordings, hundreds of performances, films and television shows, and memories of grandeur. But what he left with Bobby Connolly that day in June 1963 was simpler and more profound. He left behind hope, opportunity, and a reminder that no one is beyond redemption. Sometimes the most powerful thing a legend can leave behind isn't a song at all. It's a second chance,